Morning, this is the House Appropriations Committee. It is Friday, April 25th, Representative Harrison's birthday, 2025. And we are here not just because it's his birthday, but because we are hearing more about the impacts of potential federal funding cuts. And we have with us Kristen Murphy, the Executive Director of the Vermont Developmental Disabilities Council, to talk to us about potential impacts that they have. So we appreciate your patience as we were trying to get ourselves off the floor. And welcome, we're glad to have you with us. If you want to introduce yourself and take it away, please.
Sure. Thank you and happy birthday. For the record, my name is Kristen Murphy. I'm Executive Director of the Vermont Developmental Disabilities Council. I am also President of the Board of Directors for the National Association of Councils on Developmental Disabilities. So because of my national role, I am in daily contact with the network of disability advocates who are working at the federal level to understand and address cuts in vital services to people with disabilities and to infrastructure that supports them. Developmental disability councils like mine are kind of part of that human services infrastructure. So I will just give you a little quick level set on what is a developmental disability council, or I will say DD council. First, a developmental disability you can think of as a significant lifelong disability that starts in childhood before the age of 26. So autism, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy. A governor's council on developmental disabilities exists in every state and territory, 56 in total. We were created in 1970 by Congress through the Federal Developmental Disabilities Assistance and Bill of Rights Act. And although this is slated to end at the end of next month, we currently report to what's known as the Administration for Community Living in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. One of the results of the reorganization announced by the Secretary of HHS is that a consolidated umbrella for all disability and aging services is being taken away. So why did Congress decide to create DD councils? Federal lawmakers from both parties understood that the cornerstones of disability policy, so think the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, certain key titles in Social Security, these would not be faithfully implemented at the state level without certain boots on the ground. So our enabling statute created three entities: a DD council, which focuses on public policy, systems change, and the development of citizen advocates. Two, a protection and advocacy organization, which is typically a nonprofit. This uses the tools of the court to protect the rights of people with disabilities. So here in Vermont, that is the Vermont Disability Rights Vermont, or part of Vermont Legal Aid as well. And then the third entity is a University Center on Disability and Community Inclusion, which is the Center for Disability and Community Inclusion at UVM. They use the tools of research and teaching. DD councils like mine have a very unique place in state government. In Vermont, I report to a public board, as do all my colleagues across the country, and that board is appointed by the governor, or in a few cases, an agency secretary. That board must have a majority of its members be individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities or family members of people with IDD. So we have 16 representatives from all across the state. I like to say right now it's Danby to St. Jay and Brattleboro to St. Albans and everything in between. Then we have 6 representatives from state government and 4 from partner organizations. The Vermont DD Council sits administratively in the Secretary's office at the Agency of Human Services as an affiliated board. As a condition of receiving our annual federal appropriation, the Secretary signs a set of assurances, including ensuring our authority to advocate for policies consistent with our federal enabling statute and with the directives of our members, especially the citizen members. That is why my colleague Susan Aronoff and I have the unique, I think might be the only, we're the only 2 in the state, ability to speak with you on behalf of the council, obviously not on behalf of AHS, but independent from any approval process at our host agency. So I understand you to be particularly interested in sort of dollars and positions within state government. State council
organization. Yeah, I guess.
So state councils are funded by Congress based on a funding formula that's set out in our act. The formula is population-based, so here in Vermont, we receive the minimum amount authorized. That is $526,000 a year, so just a little bit north of $500,000, not nearly enough to actually run a council. That is widely, that's not just my opinion, that's sort of widely talked about. And while we have a line in the state of Vermont budget, it's simply a pass-through. I'm one of the few councils, we're one of the few councils that does not receive any state general funds. We do get a small amount of in-kind service, but really essentially no state funds. That supports 3 state of Vermont positions, 2 classes in classified service, and then I am in unclassified service because I am appointed by the public board that I report to. We've been flat funded for the last 5 years. And that has caused me to become more clever about finding parts of other federal grants to fund activities that are consistent with the plan that we have written and submitted to the federal government that says how we will improve services in the state of Vermont. We've, in the draft budget, which was leaked last week, very unusual for an OMB budget to be leaked this early in the process. DD councils were zeroed out. The Protection and Advocacy Network, the money that they received through the DD Act, was zeroed out. The University Center on Disability and Community Inclusion was zeroed out. We were moved to other sections and then we were zeroed out. Now, this is a draft budget and our networks are trying to push back, but the current politics suggest that we should take those cuts very, very seriously. So how is that going to impact state government? I'm going to start by talking about what DD councils do for government, and then I'm going to zoom out a little bit and talk about what some of my colleagues do as well, if I can do this all in the next 10 minutes. How do DD councils help state government? We provide leadership in the disability space. I co-chair the Health Equity Advisory Commission, which was created by you, the legislature. I co-chair the Medicaid and Exchange Advisory Committee as well, which is a required advisory body under federal rules for Medicaid. Susan Aronoff and I participate in or are members of at any given time at least 15 or more advisory groups at the Agency of Human Services or sometimes the Agency of Education. We provide core funding for Green Mountain Self-Advocates, a nationally recognized leader in the self-advocacy movement and a critical conduit through which state of Vermont receives input from people with lived experience of intellectual and developmental disabilities. Also, my members provide direct input on policy decisions that the state is making around services to people with IDD. This kind of input is not like a nice frosting on the cake. It is, in fact, an explicit expectation for receipt of Medicaid funds through the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare. I was also one of the lead writers for the Pathways to Partnership grant, which is bringing $10 million to Vermont to strengthen transition services for youth with disabilities, especially pre-employment and job acquisition services. Just a couple of success stories. Though it may feel a little counterintuitive, our role as a watchdog an advocate for the implementation of federal rules around disability services has in fact been invaluable to the state of Vermont. The council was initially the sole advocate that insisted that Vermont must and should adopt independent case management for home and community-based services funded by Medicaid. Eventually, the state was put on a plan of correction because indeed they needed to do that. But we were the first to sound the alarm and say, no, those rules really will apply to Vermont. Now, 11 years out, we are expecting to see 2 really excellent independent case management entities start working in Vermont for people with developmental services. And I believe that that's going to be a game changer in terms of allowing the recipients of those services to advocate for filling more of their hours and for a higher quality of support. Another success story, the council partnered with the state treasurer to ensure that Vermont had a successful ABLE savings program. ABLE is something that Congress created about 10 years ago to allow people with disabilities to save money without losing asset-tested benefits. Today, more than 1,200 Vermonters have ABLE accounts with over 11.5 million under management. That's a very high uptake on a per capita basis. And that's money that people with disabilities can use for disability-related expenses that are not covered by public programs, as many things are not. These are the kind of benefits that the state of Vermont receives through an annual federal appropriation of just a little north of $500,000. I was in a meeting earlier this morning with leadership from many of the disability programs in Vermont. Most of these programs operate as private nonprofits rather than as an entity within state government. Still, they are highly, highly dependent on federal grants. And the reduction of this funding will mean critical pieces of the safety net for Vermonters with disabilities will falter. Ultimately, this has cost implications for the state in medical emergencies, unstable housing, poor education outcomes, even incarceration. Here are just a few examples of some of my partners who also are aware that they have been zeroed out in pieces of the federal budget. The Disability Law Project of Vermont Legal Aid receives a significant federal funding through its partner at Disability Rights Vermont as a sub-grantee. In the last year, that funding helped 130 individuals, all of whom had legal problems directly related to their disability. And many more requests for help had to be denied due to a lack of resources. The funding that they know they are losing, they already know they are losing, would be the loss of 2 to 3 lawyers. And this would end the vast majority of their work for children with disabilities and adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. The Center for Disability and Community Inclusion, which I mentioned is that entity at UVM, provides important services to school districts and state-operated community agencies. CDCI provides 15,000 hours to the disability community. It serves 3,400 educators and other providers by giving them high-quality training so that they can deliver the best services possible. Their budget is $5.9 million, of which only about 600,000 comes from the money that was zeroed out in that leaked federal budget. However, that money in the federal budget is critical to leveraging the rest of their budget. So the return on that for $1 of the money that has been zeroed out in the federal budget, CDCI brings in $9.60. And I will mention quickly my colleagues at Vermont Family Network, which provides support to families with children and teens with disabilities or special healthcare needs. I have less statistics here, but 95% of their money is federal. I was not able to gather a complete list of these impacts, but I hope that you can see how federal budget cuts will have a ripple effect across the network of supports that organizations like mine have spent years building. Ultimately, it will be the nearly 1 in 4 Vermonters, that's 24%, is according to the Behavioral Risk Surveillance System, who live with at least one disability in our state. Even groups like mine that do not provide a direct service like Meals on Wheels or legal representation are a necessary part of this ecosystem because we act as a bridge between the end user and the systems of care that they rely on, ensuring quality and accountability with an attention to the voice of people with lived experience. And I think I made it in 15 minutes.
Is that something that you could submit to us so we have?
It's a little sloppy right now, but
That's just fine.
I'll fix it.
To Aaron. That would be terrific, Kristen. Go ahead.
I have one question.
Sure.
Title I, maybe it's changed to another title, but Title I years ago had a triple E and compensatory education program in one of the schools. Is that something that you're involved with?
I would probably be not, I would be faking it if I tried to say I was anywhere an expert on that. I do know that my colleagues at CDCI provide a lot of training to even early education services.
Yeah, this was the preschool and the school.
preschool and school. So yeah, that would be probably most connected to CDCI at UVM. My current state plan doesn't actually spend a lot of time on that. We can't do everything, so that, or my members didn't choose to put that in the plan.
Education, I'm not sure who that might be, the Department of Education, Agency of Education.
Probably, yeah.
Tiff.
Whoever. I'm just wondering, so if the money goes away, what is its impact? How would you translate that in terms of what services are no longer available to people living with disabilities?
We're still working collectively to come up with more definitive answer to that, but what you would see most likely is reduced legal support. So people so then real people will struggle with more legal problems in accessing services. You will see reduced family support through our family network. You will see reduced advocacy and quality assurance advocacy on our part. These things would then ripple out to a population that is about to be severely stressed, because all of this pales by comparison to the cuts that we're expecting in Medicaid, right? That's the bottom line. We need to be here to both fight for Medicaid and also to help support people as they're going to become more stressed when their services begin to be reduced. I'm sorry that I don't have a super clear answer, but we are putting that together.
Well, you've already mentioned the 25% of the state population.
Yeah.
Would be eligible for services, advocacy, et cetera, that you provide. So, thank you. Well, I guess my last thing is, do you know as a proportion of your membership, the 56 organization, the councils, what percentage of them are solely federally funded?
I think it's probably five.
5 of them.
I don't, some of the territories might also not get territorial money, but among the states, I think it's about 5.
And those that get state money, is it like a match or?
No, it's not usually a match.
It's all over the place?
It's all over the place.
Okay.
It's all over. And sometimes it's specifically for a piece of work, and sometimes it's just sort of for their general operation. But we must always provide 70% of every dollar has to go to state plan work as opposed to overhead.
That is very helpful. Thank you both for coming in. Appreciate your flexibility since you're so late on the floor. We're now going to ask to see if we can get about legal aid in, thanks to your testimony also. So it's ripple effects are great. And thank you for all the work that you do. We really appreciate it. Okay. And so we have switching topics to the Department of Labor. You are on, ladies and gentlemen. We can pull up.
Thank you.
We can pull up the third chair. I don't know how many of you are coming up, but you're good this way? Okay.
Morning, everyone.
So this is the Department of Labor we have. If you all want to introduce yourselves, that would be terrific.
For the record, Michael Harrington, Commissioner for the Department of Labor.
For the record, I'm Chad Wozniak, Chief Financial Officer for the Department of Labor.
Just checking, did we get something from you? Or is it just the part of the big spreadsheet?
Just part of the big spreadsheet, and yep.
Okay.
So I'm happy to start wherever you'd like, but just for general knowledge, we're predominantly federally funded as a department. That number has changed over the years depending on programs and funding, but it's roughly probably around 60-40 right now. So 58.36% federal funded. And then the rest is out of general fund, which is about 22%, 19% of special fund, and less than a percentage out of department transfers. So those programs, if we're talking just general like federal landscape and what's most at risk, Most of those are core base funding. They're not special grants that come to the department or contracts where, maybe we've seen nationally grants or contracts being canceled by the federal government. In this case, they're base funding allocations. They're usually based on some type of formula funding that's provided to the department. And again, our biggest programs that receive the most funding are our unemployment insurance program and our workforce development program. And each of those receive also other funds for other special initiatives and activities. Our one program that is most federally funded, although it's probably one of the smallest programs, is our Labor Market Information Division. And so they are probably 95% federally funded. But again, that funding comes out of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And right now we haven't seen anything that would indicate that those dollars are at risk at the moment.
And that's Matt.
Yes.
Yes, who has such great information. So some of your stuff is workforce, but I mean, what are the different names of your federal, because you don't have that many, so what?
Yeah, so if we look just at workforce, most of our funding comes out of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, or WIOA. And that covers Title I and Title III under WIOA. It includes funding we receive for adult participants, youth participants, or dislocated workers, so those individuals that are laid off. It includes funding for veteran service programs that we have. It includes some apprenticeship dollars. It includes a program called Wagner-Pizer, which is considered what's known as labor exchange money. So that's the triaging that comes into our job centers. So it's general assistance, if you will, for job seekers. Trying to think of other special funding streams that are federally funded.
Small pools in the mine safety.
Yeah, so we receive some dollars out of what's called MSHA, or Mine Safety Administration. And those monies are actually granted out to a contractor.
Off to?
Right now it goes to AGC, Associated General Contractors. And again, it's for training. So it's for training their folks and providing training across the state for, it's called mine safety, but in Vermont, we don't have a lot of mines, but it is used for trench safety. So we do a lot of trenching for construction projects. And so that can be used for trench safety as well.
And so the WIOA funds are still there?
They're still active. We get those in 3-year blocks. I don't know where we are in our current block of funding. But again, I'm not even sure I'd call it a risk. And it was there before the Trump administration took over. And that is WIOA, the program was up for reauthorization by Congress over the last 2 years. I think there's still a desire for our congressional policy committees to move the reauthorization of WIOA forward, but it has not been reauthorized. That doesn't mean it's not getting funded. There are many programs that still receive funding, congressional funding, that were never reauthorized, but Congress has chosen to continue to fund those programs. So again, that's the one risk there, is that it is, at least having a conversation around it because it's up for reauthorization.
How much do you get? I mean, I see you've got youth and adult and dislocated worker. I mean, how much do you get usually in total for WIOA on an annual basis?
I think it's around 8 million.
It's about 6 million.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah.
And is this a reimbursable thing, or do you have to draw it down as you use it, or how does that?
Yeah, the logistics are, the majority of our federal funds are reimbursable funds. So we spend them and then draw them down for the reimbursement. So we don't take them in advance. We don't take dollars in advance from the program.
Okay. Yes, please.
So can you, I don't know what this is, the disability employment policy development, line item. It's, 2 million. I'm on Department of.
Next to last one.
Next one.
Yeah.
Oh, retain.
That is actually the retained grant. So we've talked about it in this committee. I know the committee has had others, folks talking about it, but that is the $21 million grant we got 3 or 4 years ago for reemployment services that go towards injured individuals to get them back to work. You may remember it's a program we partnered with Dartmouth Hitchcock on. And so there's, again, roughly about 2 million we spent out of that, I'm assuming, is that?
In the past year.
Yeah, in the past year.
We just heard from the Disabilities Council that that they may be zeroed out in the budget. And do you perceive that this could be at risk?
It's one-time dollars that have already been appropriated, so I don't see them clawing it back.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and that was a discretionary award that we received, so it had a finite timeframe to it, which ended this past March. We then had a no-cost extension granted to us for that. So we have it for another year for this coming year. So I don't see it at risk, being that we literally just barely got the no-cost extension.
And is this something you're gonna apply for in future years, assuming the program keeps going?
No, I don't.
No, it was a one-time program. Yeah, so we were awarded along with a handful of other states for phase 2 of the project. We also got phase 1 money, but there are no phases after that, so it ends.
So except for that one, all the rest of them are formula. So are we at a minimum state getting get more than others for all those categories, right?
Yeah, in the majority of those categories, we are what's called a minimum state. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm just wondering, will the Department of Labor be asked to be compliant? Will funding for programs that are geared to, say, women or people with disabilities, or I'm just thinking about WIOA funding, certain groups of people, immigrants, and I don't know how many of those tuitions you fund, but will it be difficult for you under the current administration to fund that?
I think to your point, we do have what's known as a migrant seasonal farm worker program. And so we do have funding that comes and it allows us to work again with agricultural workers on farms. We, in some cases, have a program where we authorize or certify housing and then also help with the H-2A visa program. I haven't seen any indication of that, but a lot of things happen without any indication. And so I don't know whether or not we'll be impacted down the road. It hasn't come up so far in terms of funding for that program that's at risk. Again, it is somewhat of the base foundational structure of the work that we do already. So again, I don't know whether or not that will change down the road.
Could you do it? I was just wondering, could you do it if you didn't have the federal funding? What would change?
We currently have roughly 2 staff individuals, and then we also have an MOU with the Agency of Agriculture. So I think that would be something we would have to look at. It's roughly about 178,000 out of that program. So I don't think we would have to get rid of the program, but it's not like we have an extra 178,000 sitting around. We would have to think about how those funds are used.
Well, and just my last question is adult basic education funded at all through
Not out of.
Department of Labor? Okay.
So, go ahead.
But this is all coming through Congress.
Yeah, through appropriations or Congress. Yeah.
So your biggest one is the unemployment insurance, which was 74 million.
Yeah, and just to clarify that, that is, it also includes what comes out of our trust fund. So some of those are benefit dollars. So the program funding of that 73,919,000 is roughly around 10 to 11 million, is what actually comes to us for administrative funding. The rest is, and the only reason it's marked as federal is that when we receive contributions from employers, those contributions are put into our trust fund, which actually resides at the federal treasury, and we have to draw those down. So
given that the economy could be in a recession soon, if we aren't already, it's always retrospective, so we don't know. And trade and everything else is affecting employment or businesses, and more people could be laid off. The unemployment insurance trust fund becomes that much more important. And I know in 2008, 2009, it ended up being pretty dicey, and then it ended up costing us a lot of money for a while, all of that. So what is the health of the trust fund now? What's the balance? How are you feeling about the health of it?
it's certainly a concern. I mean, no one knows what the next economic downturn will look like. How deep will it be? How long will it last? I can tell you that there's not as much in terms of dollars in the trust fund right now as there was in 2007, 2008, when that recession hit. That was an exceptionally long recession. And obviously the pandemic was exceptionally short, but extremely deep in terms of a recession. So I think we still have a ways to go to get our trust fund to where we need it to be for an economic recession.
So where is it now, and where would you like it to be?
I'd have to pull the most recent numbers, but we're at
We're about 305.
305. Yeah, so
And
305 million.
yeah, and where would you like to be?
I would personally, I would like us to be over 4.
Okay,
Prior to the pandemic, we were at 520 million. And then we did not use all of those funds, and that's predominantly because the federal government, stepped in and paid for a lot of the benefits that were paid out by states.
right.
So we didn't fully drain the trust fund. We were at about 330 million, I believe, in 2007. And we ended up borrowing in that situation as well.
Right, and that's when it gets expensive.
Yeah.
Right, Dave?
Are your IT systems materially stronger today than they were during the pandemic?
No. So if we could hold off on a recession, I know when I would, the best case scenario would be after our new system goes live, which is the spring/summer of 2026. So we're about a little over a year away from that.
We'd be in a similar situation.
Yeah, if we find ourselves in a situation similar to the difference between the recession and the pandemic is that, in many cases, it's, to your point, it's retrospective. You start to see a slow creeping up of claims over a long period of time. And so, before you get to the height of the recession, in the pandemic, what overwhelmed us was all of those laid off individuals came in the way of like 2 weeks. And so I think from that perspective, the other big piece with the pandemic that we don't traditionally run into with recessions is that the pandemic created a lot of other benefit programs. So, we're really good or can be very good at administering the one program. When you start piling on all these new novel programs on top of it, that creates a lot of stress on the system. So we wouldn't see that in I think a traditional recession setting.
What are you seeing in terms of increases in insurance claims?
Not anything that's totally outside the norm of coming out of the winter season. We can certainly pull the data for you and look at it. We do look at it week over week, and Rowan may have some numbers at her fingertips, but we're not seeing large spikes or increases at this point that are abnormal to.
But I'm wondering if it's sort of steadily increasing or whether it's flat or,
Yeah, I'd have to map that out and get that back to you.
okay, that would be helpful too.
I'm not seeing anything again, that would be outside the traditional this time of year. But we'll get that to you.
That'd be great. Jim?
Speaking of the new system.
Yeah.
You'll be coming back for the ribbon cutting?
We'll be taking the old system on that too, right? So, I'll come for the removal of the old system.
Before we forget, you took over as labor commissioner, in a very, very difficult period. It was, some might say baptism by fire, with a situation that no one ever envisioned. I just want to thank you for persevering and staying through all that, because I'm sure you had some very, very long days when it didn't anything would go right.
So we had a great team, but thank you very much. I appreciate that support.
I'd like to follow that up. My thanks, and I know specifically there were a lot of constituents, in my district, that you helped them into a really tough situation. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mine too.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I appreciate it, and it's my pleasure to serve the state and the claimants and the businesses, and I appreciate the support. This committee has always been very supportive of the work we do, and I've always said that whatever we need, we can come and ask for it. So I do appreciate that partnership. So thank you.
Well, you're one of the easier departments because it's mostly federal fund here. Have a couple say
Right. Lynn? Well, I got here in 2009, so I lived on Commerce.
Yes, yeah.
Both of the events, and I remember one day we rewrote the entire UI bill on Wednesday,
Yeah.
Thursday. They closed down on Friday. So it was a stress test. That was, if you want a stress test, that pandemic thing was a stress
Yep.
test.
Absolutely.
And you survived it.
Yeah.
Pretty
We all
well.
did. So.
90,000 claimants in like 2 weeks or something. One of the issues I want to ask about is what about fraud?
Mhm.
And where are we on that grid, on the 1 through 5 piece?
No,
We were at 1, when you go from the amount of money you have in your funds.
Yeah.
As we worked back from 2010 or 2011, from the grand bargain, we got back and finally had enough money to be either at 1.
Oh, in the tax rate
in the
schedule?
tax rate
Yep.
schedule.
Yep.
Yeah, I want to know about the fraud issues, because that was something you did face. And
Yeah.
where does that stand? And number 2, where are we on that tax base?
Yeah, as a state, we do really well, mainly because we're a small state. And so the more you digitize your systems, and I'll give you an example, but the more risk you open yourselves up to fraud. So we actually do quite well on the fraud piece, and we were hit with fraud like every other state was during the pandemic. And again, on a much smaller scale than some of the very large states, but we did fare very well. And actually, in some cases, it was our old technology that spared us. And so because our systems were so rudimentary, because we still require applicants to call to open an initial claim, because we still send paper verifications to home addresses, those were the things that made a difference for us in the fraud world. So, we've never had before the pandemic a fraud unit, and now we do have a fraud unit within our UI division, and they review fraud. They review claims for fraud. We also have a partnership, as every other state does, with our national association that stood up what's called the Integrity Data Hub. And so all UI claims from all states go through the data hub. and are scrubbed for fraud and ranked for suspicious activity. And then, then we get into things like multi-factor authentication and other processes and procedures, and they are good. They create also a lot of issues for the types of people we support, right? So they require someone to have at least a basic knowledge of technology and how that works, and email and cell phone, or levels of authentication. So it does create some challenges for the types of customers that we assist. But from a fraud perspective, we fare very good. There's two types of fraud just in general, and I think what we're really talking about is identity theft fraud, which was the one people, imposters trying to identify as a legitimate person and use that person's information to file a claim. We also run into claimant fraud, which would be an actual individual providing false information. We as a country, the goal is to be, we call these improper payments. So when dollars go out the door improperly, we get an improper payment rate. The goal is to be under 10% from a national perspective. And we have been under, except for obviously the year of the pandemic, we are consistently under that 10% from an improper payment rate. But everything goes into that rate. So it's not just fraud, it's, system malfunctions and other, human error and other things that fall into that bucket as well.
On the tax rate.
Oh, and the tax rate, we're still in Schedule 1. So we are in the lowest tax rate. And that is based on a 10-year look back. We did, and there was legislation that removed the pandemic year or two from that calculation. So it does look at a 10-year look back in terms of benefits paid out to assume what healthy is on the trust fund and whether we should be in tax Schedule 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. So we are still in tax Schedule 1, which again was, it means that the bucket that is the trust fund fills up slower, but it was also meant to provide some relief to employers coming out of the pandemic, because they are paying less in taxes coming out of, because we're in a lower tax rate. But the fund in itself, I mean, some states, just by way of their own strategy, ride that line of being in the positive or the negative. And some states carry a negative balance all the time, and they're constantly borrowing, whether it's a healthy economic situation or not. And Vermont took a very proactive role in ensuring that we didn't want to get back to the situation where we were borrowing again, because there are a lot of other factors that play into that and implications that come when you have to borrow money.
From anybody? I'm looking at the screen, not seeing anything. Jim?
Commissioner, you are too young to retire.
That is correct. Although we would like to, we were just talking about that.
Let's see where this is going.
Yeah. So, I mean,
Is the
other
Commissioner
than
more
gardening,
than-
or, I mean, what do you,
Yeah,
if you can share?
yeah, not prepared to share, but still looking at a couple different. So it was time, and I truly have appreciated, even during the rough times, I was thinking back, and while they were the most difficult years, I think for our team, it created a level of trust and a bond for our leadership team and our frontline staff that maybe wouldn't have been there if we hadn't gone through that together. It wasn't a good experience for anybody, but it did create a certain bond and camaraderie and situation at the department where I think a really tight, cohesive team came out of that.
we wish you well.
Thank you very much.
Hope you'll let us know when you get it figured out.
Still around, so if you need me to come back, happy to come back. We're not over yet. We're not over yet.
No, we are not, so we may see you again. But anyway, thank you all for
If
coming.
you have any questions, yeah, let us know.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So committee. That is it for this morning. Let's get to my agenda. At 1:00, we have, Family Services, Child Welfare coming in. There are some, things that have been posted, and there may be some more things that'll be posted. And then at 1:30, Emily Burns from JFO is going to come in and talk about rescissions. So we'll have more of a chat
Existing
about
or
that.
potential?
How they work.
Oh, just how they work. We're talking.
We are
abstract.
creating, yeah, I mean, we have statute and we have ways in how all of that works. So I think that that'll be, very interesting. So, why don't we go off live?